There we go. Awesome. All right. Hey everyone, good morning. Welcome. Thank you very much for spending your Saturday. Just talk about this, how coronavirus has really impacted the world of real estate, especially for majority of us that are online right now. We're all landlords here, or maybe you're looking to become a landlord, or maybe it doesn't really matter at this point whether you have just a couple of units or a single family home or 4,000 units. The same crisis is still impacting all of us. And what we're going to talk about today is how to handle this. What do we do? And have a discussion around some of the issues with dealing with this crisis. So first off, I encourage you guys to go ahead, ask questions as we go through, and I'm going to introduce you to this awesome panel that we put together here. You'll see in and maybe Scott, you can talk a little bit about where where they can ask questions. What's that box called there?
Yeah, the chat box.
Chat box. Thank you. So go ahead, put your questions in the chat box, and would welcome any types of questions from you guys as we go through this. Right. So let's go ahead and hit the next slide. Here, just a quick disclaimer of what you're going to see, and we're just sharing information with you guys right now. We are, this is not legal advice, even though we do have an attorney on the panel here. This is not legal advice. Whatever you hear from us today, please take it up with your attorney, take it up with your counsel, take it up with your CPA, verify that everything that you're going to do prior to implementing any things you hear today, that everything is legal and not going to get you in any trouble, okay? So let's go ahead and click the next slide. So the agenda for today is, the panel for today is, all right. So, so this is going to be our illustrious panel. We have Kenny Wolf with Wolf Investments, Gary Duvall with Rem Commercial, and David Streeter with, well, he's a sole practitioner in law. So, and we're going to go deeper into what they do. And as far as your moderators, there's myself with Bulletproof Cash Flow, and Scott Krusmark with Rehab Estimator Pro, and he'll talk a little more about his product as well, which is kind of cool. So let's go into the agenda now. So today we're going to cover how to deal with distressed tenants, some good landlord business practices, good landlord healthy practices as well, in terms of just maintaining a good and clean area for your tenants, like you should always do anyway, but even more so given where we are today. Dealing with debt service and expenses, and of course something that we just cropped up in the last couple of days, the CARES Act and House Bill 197, which we'll share our thoughts around that as well. By the way, this presentation will go anywhere between 40-45 minutes. So again, ask your questions throughout. We'll save your Q&A for the end. Okay, so let's get into a little bit about our guests. So go ahead and hit the next slide there. So Kenny could talk a little bit about his background, and go ahead, Kenny. Maybe share with the audience what you do, what you're about.
Sure, yeah. Hey guys, thanks for having me on today. So I'm Kenny Wolf, president here at Wolf Investments. We've been investing in multifamily real estate for over 9 years now, going on 10, I guess, here in just to be December this year. So we've done everything from multifamily. We own $12 stores as well, hard money loans and ground up development. But on the commercial side, we've had over 200 million in transactions in over 5 different states, and I've gotten up to about 4,000 units across those 5 states. We do have part of our management in-house here in Texas, Oklahoma, and Louisiana. We have our properties under our management company. I bought one about 2 years ago. And then so far we've been voted in to save 3 multifamily deals where there was another person who put the deal together. Those investors and voted that person out, and then voted us in, Wolf Investments, in to turn it around. And actually we're being approached on a 4th one right now. So anyway, so that's kind of our background. Beyond that, before that I was a CFO of an oil and gas company at a pretty young age. So accounting is definitely my background.
Awesome. Cool. So, and excellent. So, and basically what we're going to talk a little bit about is us get the perspective of a landlord of how to deal with this. That's why I wanted to have Kenny on. So it's super. Thank you so much. So next up we have Gary.
Yes,
with Rum
thank you.
Commercial.
Thanks, Augustino. Welcome to everyone. Rum Commercial is a third-party property management company. We specialize in multifamily and commercial investment management. We've been doing it for approximately 39 years, primarily focused in the Northeast Ohio area, although we would go outside of that region for a large enough multifamily property. We currently manage over 1,500 units, and my background primarily is I graduated from Kent State University with a degree in architecture. So I understand the property management business from a practical standpoint of maintaining structures and understanding how the structural and mechanical systems work. Gives us kind of a task or a skill that other property management companies may not have.
Yeah, and you know what? And if you guys ever listen to the Bulletproof Cash Flow podcast, you've probably heard me say this a million times, is that one of the most important things about getting into a deal, whether it's a single family home or 500 units, is due diligence. But just as important, if not even more important, is the operations post-acquisition. Super, super important, and which is what we're going to talk a little bit about today here with dealing with this crisis. But, Gary, as he said, a very experienced operator, knows what he's doing, and he and his team just do a bang-up job. So thanks very much for being on. And then let's jump over to David really quick here. David, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, good morning, everybody. Like the slide says, I'm David Streeter. I'm an attorney. I have developed a real niche in the real estate area, working with investors, property managers, landlords. Doesn't matter if it's commercial or residential. Obviously, over the last week, I've been inundated with calls from various, landlords, property managers as to how to deal with this crisis, just from a business standpoint. So there's been a lot of new legislation that has either passed or about to pass. So, we're going to get into some of this later. But I just encourage all my clients, you got to keep an open mind, be patient, and be willing to kind of roll with the punches here. So that's it.
Yeah. And getting great legal counsel is something you definitely have to have on your team when you're building your team and putting together your plan to really build a business in real estate. And I've been working with David for many, many years. Great guy, bang up guy, and definitely knows what he's doing when it comes to real estate. So just awesome. All right. So let's jump over to the next slide. So what we wanted to talk a little bit about is really take it from the perspective of a landlord, like where you guys are right now. Everybody who's on are going to be facing the same sort of thoughts. And if anything, by the way, we're going through the thoughts here, put it in the chat box. Let us know if we're missing something. But really want to take a perspective of a guy like Kenny, for instance. He owns property, right? Here's some of the things that he's thinking about. And then we're gonna really transition over to the property management and legal side of how do we deal with it. So maybe Kenny, let's talk a little bit about what's happened just in this past week. It's been a very big week, right? 3.3 million people added to the unemployment rolls. Insane. Never happened before. I think it's the highest ever, right?
Right. Yeah, I think it is. So we, obviously we're watching it closely. I think each property is going to be behave differently on all this. So like we actually dug in to see which of our tenants had restaurant or bar related jobs, and to see kind of exposure there, because I think those were going to probably be the most hard hit. Obviously there's other ramifications and trickle down effect of this whole thing, this whole mess. But to us, that seems to be the biggest kind of exposure. So we're seeing a lot of, I think one of ours, the highest I think was maybe 8%. Of the total property. So anyways, but I mean, it's, these are very uncertain times. So as I like to say, you have to keep calm and invest on that side of it. But, for the properties we do have, obviously our management company has been in constant contact with the residents, asking them about them, what's their situation, how can we help, those kind of things as well. And so and also, how this is affecting our work orders. I mean, because we're not sending our maintenance guys into people's units, only for emergency repairs only. It's actually, I think, in the long term going to be beneficial for us. It's really pushed more and more people to do everything online. The majority of our properties, almost all of them, you can apply online. You can virtually tour a unit online. You can post a work order online. So everything's going online. We're actually seeing leasing still coming in, not probably what it should be for this part of March, but we're actually seeing folks still lease online. So we're kind of telling our folks to one, just make sure all the units are ready, because think about the same amount of people are going to move. It's just going to be a lot more condensed this year. We're also seeing a lot of cancel of notice to vacates. We had, I think each week we get maybe 4 or 5, or it depends on the size of the property, but we've got some larger ones, but we're seeing a lot of folks cancel their notice to vacates and actually go to month or sign another 12-month lease. So which is good for us. It means we're going to keep our occupancy up during this time. What it's not good for, if you have a lease up property, it's going to be a little bit more challenging because folks don't want to move during this time. Although that being said, it's pretty property specific. We've got a property out in El Paso, Texas, with 26 3-bedroom units. So we're actually seeing more traffic on those earlier than usual, because usually those don't start getting traffic till April or May, because folks want their kids out of school, where kids are out of school. It's basically summer already. So we're seeing a lot of traffic, obviously online, of those. But I think we had 9 folks, check out the property and submit their online application just on that one property. So it's interesting to see how it's going to change this for the future. I think it's for the long term, it's going to be beneficial. Short term, we're going to have to kind of work through all this and navigate it all and all that. So, my 2 cents on this whole economic downturn is that we didn't have anything systemically wrong beforehand. It wasn't like in 08 and 09 when we had a massive foreclosure issue on the single family side in this country. This is more of a just caused by a virus, right? So, which it's definitely damaging, but I think it's going to be pretty short-lived. Partly because one, they've injected almost twice the amount of money, the Fed, dumping money into the system. So that's one big deal. That's going to be huge because they're double than what we had in 2008, 2009, when we had actually, foreclosures to work through. And then also too, a lot of the folks affected in this, those jobless claims are going to be your hourly employees. Those tend to be the first fired and the first hired. So as we come back out of this, I think certain parts of the country sounds like is going to come out sooner than later, kind of somewhat back to normal. And then I think we'll see some of that hiring going on. I think there are definitely certain cities like I'll pick New York City. I think they're going to be in it for the long haul, but and other places like that. But I think the majority of the country should be back to normal maybe in the next 6 to 8 weeks. It's the new normal.
Right. Well, I mean, to your point, many of these people were laid off, and I think the last ones out are probably gonna be the first ones back. But this whole SBA loan thing is just absolutely amazing. Or if it works like they say it's going to work, right? Because basically, employers can go out and get an SBA 7 loan. And I'm stealing some thunder down the road, but just real quick to touch on that folks are actually incentivized to keep their employees on now. And I think they compare it to January, February rent, or your payroll, and then what it was and what's going to be in around July. And then part of that's going to be granted. So I think we'll see some of the jobs are going to obviously stick around. The hourly ones where they're shutting down, some of these restaurants and things like that. Those are going to come back, but not right away. Right. Do you want to hit the next slide, Scott?
Yep. Come on.
All right. So what does this all mean? And I think Kenny, you started talking a little bit about this already, but what does all this mean?
Yeah, we obviously have our offices shut down to the public. Some spots we have it where they can make an appointment. Some folks can just tour it themselves, either online or through Rently. Is another option as well. So really kind of moving to that online model. Obviously our maintenance guys we're keeping them busy. They are getting units made ready. Obviously, those are vacant units, so they're working on those. And then also too, they're only doing emergency work orders at the moment. So the minor stuff, we're letting that kind of build up just out of safety and over precaution to everybody involved. And then our maintenance guys were told to once they go into a unit, if they see somebody, that absolutely ask if anybody's sick. If they see somebody sick, then to say, hey, we'll come back later. That's something we really want to take care of our community, our residents, and our staff. Make sure everybody's being healthy and safety and safe out there, so we can tamper this thing down. You do need to be proactive. I mean, we've been for weeks now been in contact with all of our residents through letters, through phone calls. The staff has been calling them personally, reaching out to them to see what their current situation is. For those that have lost their jobs due to COVID-19, work out payment plans, things like that to work with them. Obviously, we want to see a little bit of proof, because otherwise folks are going to take advantage of the whole system. But we believe most folks are going to be pretty honest about it on that piece. But definitely got to be proactive, talk to them, check in with them, make sure they're healthy, make sure they're safe, see if there's a way where we can help. Like if there's elderly folks, are they getting the food they need? Are they, getting the basic stuff that they need? And see if we can help out anyways. Because, we are in real estate investment. We also are in the community business too. So we like to really focus on our communities, help out, create an awesome place to live as well. So yes, it's going to be uncertain the few months ahead. Everybody's kind of in the industry holding their breath next week to see who pays rent and who doesn't. I think it's going to be pretty property specific. I know we talked to one of our properties and about two of our properties in Cleveland yesterday. One of them said we have the same amount of prepays that we do for April that we did for March and February. So I think it's going to be property specific. I'm going to guess that I'll go out on a limb here that the A and B class stuff is probably going to survive this a little bit better than maybe the B minus and the C. Obviously, the hourly employees are going to be hit the hardest as well, and that's what I'm basing my guess on.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. One other thing too is that for those listening here, Kenny mentioned Rently. So Rently is a great online way to allow people to access a unit. Right, they just put in their credit card. They go to the actual house or apartment unit. They would go ahead, type in a code. They get access. They walk in. They can tour the place without you even being there. So I'm not plugging them. But something worth definitely check it out though. It's if you guys haven't heard of it yet, just do a Google search for Rently.com. It's really good, great stuff. So all right, Scott, let's go ahead and hit the next slide. So from here, dealing with distressed tenants is obviously one of the key things. I mean, that's obviously where the rubber meets the road. These are the people that are really helping. They are the economy. Our tenants are the economy for the most part if you're dealing with C-class assets. So maybe Gary, David, maybe we could talk a little bit about how to deal with some of these tenants and try to help them through what they have going on right now.
Yeah, so there are a lot of different levels of distress in people's lives, and everybody handles stress a little differently. So what we're finding is there are people who are being very proactive. They know they're going to have an issue, and they've already reached out to us. And there are others who have, I think, just buried their head in the sand and think that it's just going to go away. Those are the ones you have to kind of reach out to make sure they understand that we're here to help them. We care about them, making sure that they know that we have plans in place to help them meet their obligations. And, sort of closing down all of our remote leasing offices takes us out of contact with a lot of our residents. So we've given them opportunities to be able to get a hold of us, let us know what's going on in the property. Sometimes that just means, for instance, I've had a couple residents.
Looks like we might have lost Gary.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Am I there, Scott?
Yep.
Okay. So letting them know where they can go. Unfortunately, a lot of those resources are overwhelmed right now. So you may end up needing to just go and help that person from a personal standpoint. So we'll go out and say, here's $100 gift card to a grocery store or whatever it is, to try to help them get through those tough times where they're waiting to see what happens, either maybe with their unemployment or maybe an assistance check of some sort. And I think that understanding which tenants are having a problem and which ones aren't having a problem is very important. And Kenny mentioned this before, that not everybody will take advantage of the situation, but there are opportunists in every social class, and I hope that majority will see this as an opportunity to take advantage of a situation where they may not need assistance. So we're hearing some sort of a notice from an employer that they have been laid off, and also showing they have some effort to apply for employment. We know in Ohio, where we're stationed, that there has been a problem with the website. It's been down a lot at this point. If they send us a screenshot of these notice they're getting when they're trying to log in that the site's down, we're accepting that as their attempt to try to apply, with some follow-up from their manager to them to make sure that they are doing the process. What we suggest is trying off-peak times. My son has been affected by this as well, and so what I suggest to him is get up 3 o'clock in the morning, and he's more successful getting through an off-peak time than he is trying to do it during the middle of the day. So if you want to be sure that you're being processed, then you may have to do some extraordinary things to get there. But as long as they're making the attempts and accepting that, is where they're trying to get one. And working home, it actually adds stress to the system. I didn't do this podcast from home today just because our internet at home has been spotty at best because of the overload on the system. So maybe trying to suggest to people that are working at home, maybe a way to get around that. If there's any suggestions, then we try to put them in the right direction. One of the tools we use here is Appfolio property management software. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, it is an online in the cloud software that allows our log in everything that's going on with their property. It also has a lot of tools for the tenant to be able to log in, pay rent, and communicate with us directly through email. And really, it gives them multiple opportunities to even pay cash for rent if they wanted to go to one of the cafe stores. So being able to communicate with those people and keep them connected and communicate with them is vital to making sure you understand where each person is. So again, this is also an opportunity for us to stress the importance of this on communication for people who just left the technology and not understanding that in times like this, maybe the only way we can communicate with you other than on the phone. And it may be your only opportunity to be able to put in an emergency work order or something of that nature. Things opportunity, we've got every time right now, we don't have an address, or to stress to them by text, essentially, that it's very important that we have your information, because we've communicated to a lot of our residents on where they need to reach out to us and what we're doing to help them. We issued a letter very early on in the state shutdown, and it communicated to them that we are allowing them to defer rent and to enter in deferred rent payments and things of that nature. And if we don't have an email for you, that comes by U.S. mail, which is not as an effective way. We are putting everything to our website. We have that letter issued to every resident to our website. It's right at the top, and it's flashing in red, basically as COVID-19. It connects you to a blog that tells the residents what we're doing, and helps them if they didn't get the communication. There's another way. It also helps our staff, who we are actually down to like half staff coming in one day and half the staff coming in an alternate day, so that we kind of keep our social distancing in the office. It allows them to not answer the same question over and over again. It's very easy for them just to point to the location on our website where the resident can get the information, and they can call back if that doesn't answer their questions. But it's a very detailed breakdown of what we're doing to help the residents. And then in addition, we've posted to all of our on-site leasing offices how to reach the essential staff and what happens in case of an emergency. We still continue to see the online maintenance requests come in pretty regularly. Whether your closet doorknob is off or whatever minor things that are happening, we're just reaching out to those residents saying that we got your maintenance request. We're only doing emergency maintenance at this point, but we will come once this whole thing is worked through. We'll come out and take care of your maintenance issues.
Now, one thing that you said that really hits home is take this crisis as an opportunity, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely key. You know, one thing that we've done with Gary's help is in one of our communities anyway, one of the larger communities, we were sending out some food. We put some pasta, sauce, cheese. Like, we're not talking anything crazy expensive here, but it's like a little care package for all the tenants in this community, right? So they're going to open up their door. We'll knock on the door and run away, leave the box in front of their door. But we'll leave that, like, a bunch of food and a note. We're talking like, you know, $5-10 a box. It's not really that much money, but it shows the tenant that you care. And when that tenant, if it's a good tenant, of course, goes to consider moving, they're going to remember stuff like that. They're going to remember it's times of crisis that are happening right now that a tenant will reflect back and say, you know what, that landlord really cares. They cared enough to at least send me a package to give me some food, you know. And especially now, Gary, when you'd mentioned that people are having a hard time and they only have 2 days left of food, that is one very inexpensive way to demonstrate to the tenants that you actually care about what they're doing, you care about their well-being, and you know, you really want them to stick around, right? So, yes. But anyway, yes, excellent, great stuff. Now, if you go over to the next slide, Scott, maybe how do you? And you touched on this before, Gary, as far as plans and reducing rents and spreading it over time. And maybe you and David can talk a little bit about that, because I know you guys worked closely on something early on before really what's happening today. I mean, you guys were on top of this thing weeks ago, right? So maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So like we work for a lot of different types of investors. I've had investors reach out to me who just want to completely abate their rent because they have no everything. They have 100% equity in their property. They don't have any mortgage payment. They don't have any issues. They've reached out and said, hey, I just want to know if my tenant needs it. Let them know that they can just defer, or not even defer, just abate the entire month's rent or whatever they need to get them through, ranging all the way up front to people who have structured payments and have to have some sort of income to make sure those payments are made. We've reached out and developed quickly what we call a rent deferment agreement. It doesn't abate rent, but it essentially allows them to defer 40% of their rent income for up to 3 months, and then allows them 6 months to pay it back. I think being flexible with that in the future, this was just an anticipation of how long this may go on, sort of thing. But if we find that it's going to be in an extended term, maybe we need to even reconsider some of those agreements. But for now, our feeling is that, maybe by the end of June, we'd be maybe on the downside of this and able to get back onto a regular payment schedule. So essentially they are agreeing to pay their full rent plus a sixth of what they deferred until the end of the year. I think that's a very generous plan at this point. There certainly will be other extenuating circumstances that we want to consider, but in general, I think with the things that the government has rolled out with enhanced unemployment, adding additional $600 a week to their unemployment, and sending them the cash payment, that certainly they ought to be able to do it at a minimum, 60% of their rent. So that's sort of where we are right now. If it comes down to it and we have to consider a specialized situation, we will. But I think that that's a very reasonable approach to what we're doing. Very early on, we reached out to all of residents and saying that we were waiving late fees for the next 90 days. I think that's a good plan, because I'm guessing that the vast majority of them are going to be late on their rent anyway. And then extending due dates, again, I think that goes back to a little bit to, being flexible and understanding each individual person's situation. And then I think accepting weekly payments is good. Some people have suggested that they're going to receive their unemployment check weekly anyway, so maybe they want to set aside a portion of that money to go towards their rent, which I think is a good plan. And David, you might want to talk about being in writing. I know why we forwarded over to you our agreement, and you reviewed it, just making sure that everything is going to be in compliance with the law.
Sure. I think to jump back a little bit about, how you started off is that, communication is key, and the way that you communicate depends on, I know we have all different levels of landlord on this, webinar here, some with just a handful of units, and then some like you, Gary, that are managing, over 1,000. For the smaller type of landlords, I've been encouraging my clients to, make a phone call, establish some sort of personal contact. When you're not able to do that because your portfolio is too large, use email, text messages, sending letters. And the idea is, communicating that you want to help them, that they're actually partners in this crisis with you because you need their rent to manage your debt service, your taxes, and your insurance. And so that's why, you might be more apt to enter into a deferred agreement or an abatement period and waiving late fees. Because the idea is you want to maintain some sort of cash flow. So by establishing that, personal contact, you're going to really find out what the tenant's situation is. I don't want you to put yourself in a position out of the gate that you're offering a full abatement or a full deferment if people are ready, willing, and able to pay their rent. Remember, a lot of the federal funding in that is going to be coming in is basically going to be earmarked and tagged for food and shelter. Because one of the things now is that I think a lot of tenants out there are hearing, in the news that they don't have to pay rent because of this crisis. And that's not the case. They still have a contractual obligation to pay rent. If they don't, they're in default. The thing that has changed is that landlords have lost their mechanism to enforce, their contracts, their leases for non-payment or other reasons because the courts aren't accepting new eviction filing. So the way you usually enforce that is by filing an eviction or forcible entry and detainer action. Well, we can't do that right now. So you have to be proactive with your communication. And then once you have a meeting of the minds through that communication, it's so important to get it in writing. So for some of the more experienced landlords out there, you'll understand this phrase, pattern and practice. So if you just have a conversation, they start sending in half payments, and it's not in writing, then down the road when this all clears and you go to enforce it, you've established a pattern and practice and it's not in writing. So the courts could interpret that against you as a landlord to say, hey, you've basically reset, your expectation and their obligation to pay rent because of your pattern and practice. So whether it's an amendment to the lease or a separate agreement like you're using, Gary, your deferred payment agreement, doesn't really matter what you call it, as long as it's in writing. It identifies the parties, the space, the lease, and whatever, the repayment terms are. And I think you need to be flexible and take this on a month-by-month basis because this is changing daily. So we don't know where we're going to be in a week. So I think that becomes important. And you can probably move on to the next slide and keep this rolling because we're going to run out of time here pretty quickly.
We did have
definitely want to get to the questions as well.
Yeah, we did have a quick question that's appropriate here. The question was, doesn't the rent abatement rules and the stimulus only affect homes in which there is a Fannie or Freddie owned mortgage?
So right now that in the CARES Act, it's not entirely clear. We're still interpreting it, but the way that I look at it, you can't do any, 3-day notices. You can't terminate tenancies, less than a 30-day period. You can't start an eviction if the house has a federally backed mortgage. So what is that? That's Freddie, that's Fannie, that's certain FHA loans, VA loans, in that. But it doesn't necessarily apply to, those landlords that have some maybe hard money lending, private financing, things like that. So it's important to do that, to know that. But the reality is at the end of the day, we're not able to enforce it because pretty much all courts, at least in our area, have not scheduled hearings. Some courts are not even accepting filings while others are. And the thing that I found, the courts that are accepting filings are taking them in, but they're not assigning a date. At least that's getting you in the queue. So if you do have a relationship gone bad, a tenant that's not going to communicate, and there's not a federally backed mortgage against that property, you can still post a 3-day notice. You can get it lined up. That may communicate to the tenant that hey, you want to help them, but they're basically forcing their hand by their failure to communicate and work out a deal with you. So at least you're kind of setting yourself up to hit the ground running to mitigate your losses once the dust clears here.
Yep. Okay.
Excellent. Excellent. Maybe Gary, maybe you could talk a little bit about dealing with those distressed tenants again, about where they can get the type of resources they need.
Yeah, so it's important. Early on, we researched before we sent out our letter to our residents, telling them what we were going to do, where they could get help, what churches, what nonprofits, what food banks they could go to. We manage property in Ohio and 5 other counties, so we went to each county website, figured out where the resources were, and included those resources with the letters that we sent out to the residents, so that they knew where they could go get food, or they knew where they could go get assistance, maybe even in paying their rent. In Ohio, there's also another thing that you can do to call in to 611, and it actually will give you some of those resources online or through a recorded message as well. So important to make sure for that person who doesn't have more than 2 days worth of food, to also have them reach out to some local churches. We've had a couple even stop into our offices to basically say that they have more money than they know what to do with, and we're looking for anybody that was needing help. So we've taken down the pastor's name and his contact information where they can reach out. Now, he's primarily focused in Stark County in the Canton area where we are, but it's important to know that there are people out there that have money that can help, and they just need to be connected with the people that are in need. And it was interesting to me that he was saying that he was having a hard time finding the person that could take advantage of their generosity. So we've connected a lot of our people with that organization. Government agencies. So one of the things that we've also asked some of our residents who are receiving government assistance is to if they had a job and it was just part-time, or they were getting just a partial assistance, and they needed to contact their caseworker to make sure that that caseworker understood that they were no longer working, because then the subsidy portion of their rent will increase, and that will help them as well. Most of the residents don't understand that it's not just an annual thing. If there's more than a $200 change in your monthly income, that the local housing authority, or in our case, Eden is one of the other agencies that's out there that helps people. They can actually change the amount of subsidy they pay for that resident based on their new financial situation. So we've encouraged all of them to do that. And then just assisting, like I said, even with how to apply for unemployment, it's very easy in Ohio. It's based primarily online. Again, just letting them know to try to do this in off-peak times, because the website, even the governor's been on almost every day, acknowledging that their system has been overwhelmed and that they just can't handle the new claims. So letting them know that, you may need to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, or you may have to stay up past midnight to get that claim filed, but you can still do it. And we really need to get a balance, obviously, between making sure we're helping the tenants and making sure we're helping our landlords. So part of that is how we schedule the rent deferment and still allowing some income stream to pay off your debt service and the things that you need to do.
Yep. Excellent. Okay. Let's pop over to the next slide, Scott. So really, it sounds to me, Gary, like you're just talking about instituting some good landlord business practices, right? It sounds like. I don't know, David. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the things around, especially around creating the exit strategies when people like landlords become under pressure, right?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, and I've been looking at some of the questions in the chat boxes, they're saying, what are your lenders saying? And I think you got to look at that on a case-by-case basis. You have to see who your lender is. Just as I encourage my clients to reach out to their tenants, you should also reach out to your lenders and see what programs are available. I know many of you use private lending. Talk to those private lenders. Create the win-win situation. Create a deferred, payment program. But the reality is that your debt service and your obligations aren't going to go away. If you're not paying them now, if they're deferred, they're piling up, and they're going to need to be paid at a future date. And if you're not getting cash flow now, that's going to be a tough, hole to, crawl out of. So you might want to start thinking of some exit strategies. What does that mean? Maybe your house has some equity. Maybe you can do, a cash out refi here, pull out some cash, set it aside, so when this clears, you'll be able to, come current in your debt obligations. Maybe if you have some really good long-term tenants, maybe, they're going to be getting some cash in hand. So enter into like a lease option or a land contract with some consideration up front that is essentially non-refundable, but applied as a credit to their purchase price down the road. That'll give you some more cash to operate your business now. If you have assets that are underperforming, maybe your NOI is not where you want it to be, consider selling it and liquidating it, and paying off your debt there. And hopefully there's a little bit of a surplus and you can set that aside, because one of the things that you need to do is you need to establish reserves if you haven't maintained them already, and use this as a lesson moving forward, that if you came into this and you were kind of caught, with your pants down and didn't have cash reserves for a few months, make that a priority in your business moving forward. And then as a last and, final resort, a deed in lieu of foreclosure with your lender. Say, hey, I'm going to lose this thing. My tenants aren't paying me. I can't service it. It's going to be a loser for all of us. Some lenders may be willing to take that back, especially depending on your lender. A lot of them, have reserves. They're loaning at 60% of LTV. So there's some equity there. But before you get to that point, you might want to consider just, selling that asset to clear up the debt and hopefully have a little bit of surplus cash to hold in your reserves.
Yeah, well, and there's two things that David pointed out too. When it comes to contacting your lenders, I actually know of people personally that have reached out to their lenders, and lenders have basically deferred payments for like 3 months. So it all took was a phone call. They made a phone call and lender said, don't pay us for 3 months. They just tack it onto the back of the loan. Again, check with your lender. It's going to vary by case. And on a related note too, they've also called their credit card companies, and they have reduced or taken the interest rate all the way down to 0 for, I think it was till the end of May or something like that. Again, that's going to vary from credit card company to credit card company, but hey, you know what? Every little bit helps, right? So there's that, number one. Number two, something else that David just touched on, the deed in lieu. Having those relationships with a bank, especially your local banks, is going to be really, really important right now, because I imagine that some people are going to do this. And if you're in a position where you can actually take on a new deal, having that relationship up front, like today, is going to be important to maybe taking on some of those assets after we get through all this, right? So banks are not in the business to take on assets, but if let's say they have a fourplex and now they ended up taking it back, what are they going to do with it? Maybe David wants to buy it, so having those relationships are really key. So let's go ahead and pop over to the next slide really quick here. All right. So again, we talked a little bit about Rently and DocuSign too, but maybe do you want to add anything to add to this slide, David?
Gary?
Or Gary?
So yeah, I mean, we've been using Rently for quite a while, and Kenny and Augustino know this. We've been using it for several months now, and we've actually increased our presence there. Ordered some additional boxes, primarily because I'm restricting the face-to-face contact with my agents and the showings. So we're doing a lot of those virtual showings. We've had quite a few of those pick up this week. And I think this is an opportunity again for a landlord who's on top of this to advance. So we've even changed our advertising to acknowledge the fact that we know everybody's being affected by this. We're still looking to rent to people, and we're actually offering the same per 40% deferred payment at move-in. So if they can come over to us and they can prove that they had a good job to start with and they're collecting unemployment, and they can show that they've been laid off from their job, we're saying basically if your rent is $600, we can defer that from the very beginning for 3 months, get you moved in, get you up to speed by the end of this year. And we've converted a tenant who maybe didn't have a landlord who was working with him and didn't understand how he was going to continue paying his rent, to now coming to a situation where they know they're working with a landlord that understands what they're going through. And that's been a good tool for us to be able to convert some residents over to our properties, understanding that they have the ability to keep a roof over their head and pay for it later, sort of approach. And just had one yesterday that came in and said she has to leave. and was having difficulty figuring out, how she was going to pay the rent that we were asking. And I offered her basically the same deferred 3-month plan, which allowed her to be able to apply and get into a unit. So DocuSign, it's like, I would say most people are probably familiar with that, but we are basically have created templates for all of our leases, for all of our properties, so that the leasing agents can complete those documents online and get them all electronically signed. Even turning the keys over at move-in, we're doing through an electronic lockbox of some sort. So, so engaging the tenant is part of the solution. So as we know, there's a likelihood that all of our utilities are going to increase. There are more people at home. They're using more water and more electric, more sewer, more gas. Encouraging them to be part of the solution is key to this, making sure they understand that they can do something to help, and that's conserving utilities. Let us know. We're not on site as much now. Let us know what's going on. Let us, if you see something that's happening, tell us, because we can certainly take care of it if you let us know what it is. And then,
and Gary, not to interrupt there, but one of the other things we've noticed too is, of all things, trash has become an issue at many of these communities at this point, right? Because people are hanging out at home and trash is overflowing. We've had to increase the number of hits to the trash can now,
Yeah,
so
for sure. Yeah. So, and then just keeping an eye out on your neighbor. I mean, there's a lot of people that just don't have that connection with a family member or something that can follow up with them. That helps create a better community as well. And just asking them also just to be a good neighbor, because, there's a lot of people at home now. And so that means that the noise level may go up. There may be more people in the laundry room. There may be, there's just going to be more people active in the property, just to be considerate and understanding, and making sure that they understand everything that's going on in their community. After the crisis is completed, or we're through this, I think that, and this is just my opinion, I think that there may be potential for an overemployment correction. My feeling is that some employers will take advantage of this, and to help. They realize maybe that they've been able to streamline a few things online, and may not need all of their people to come back. So I think we should be prepared for, maybe not everything to get back to 100% right away. It may take a couple years, to get everything back to where we need to be. So the key important thing is there are now industries that are hiring, whether it's in the medical field or the janitorial field for cleaning, whether it's, just in the sanitation field for, the extra trash that we got to pick up, or just making hand sanitizer or whatever it is. A lot of our clients have been saying, okay, well, my resident may not have a job, so here's some situations that he may be able to go out and get a new one. And so we've been trying to post those to our social media, to our website, making sure that if you indeed need a job, here's where you can look to get one.
Excellent. Let's pop over to the next slide. So of course, maintaining those healthy practices as far as just keeping things clean. And Gary touched on this a bit ago, is that limiting people coming to the office by just having people work from home, but wiping down all surfaces as well, like making sure you have and you don't have to use this Lysol, whatever it is, those throwaway things. A paper towel and some spray works just as well. Keep the area clean, right? Wash it, clean the doorknobs. And I think, Gary, don't we do that in one of our communities? We send someone through and clean all that stuff up?
We do, yeah. All the hot spots, they call them hot spots. Anything that people touch, like whether they're elevator buttons in, the elevators or the front doors or the locks or whatever it is, we have people cleaning those hot spots to make sure that the transmission of the virus is limited.
Yes. So I think limiting some of the maintenance emergency situations as well has been really, really helpful, and try to really prioritize the real big things that require maintenance versus some of the things like a busted closet doorknob, save it off to later. So yes. Let's pop over to the next slide here. So, David, you touched on this a bit ago about dealing with debt service and expenses. Maybe you and maybe even Kenny might have something to say about how to deal with that.
Oh, it looks like Kenny's muted. But anyhow, yeah, I mean, you have to open up a conversation with, your lenders, whether they're institutional, private, or hard money. There may be other people out there, stock market refugees is what I call them, people who've taken a beating in the last, month, and they have cash. People are looking to get into real estate because regardless of what's going on, real estate is still real estate. In the long term, it's proven time and again to be a good investment when it's done correctly. So there may be people out there who have cash that can come in, help you service. You might give up a little bit of equity, moving forward, but it'd become a tremendous opportunity to create a joint venture or some sort of equity participation loan, with these folks, and offering lenders preferred rate of returns. But maybe you reduce your monthly payment for a period of time and loading that on the back end. You can get very creative with any of these lenders on how to structure it. I think, institutional lenders are going to be a little bit more rigid because they're going to have policies, set forth. But your private people like Augustino on your deals that you do, this is an opportunity to go back and, just have an open and candid conversation as to what's going on. Here's the reality. And if at the end of the day, we all want to get our expected ROIs that was set forth in, your initial offering memorandum, things like that, just have the discussion. And then, make sure you're surrounding yourself with good people so you could put, these deals in place the right way.
Right. And I guess the only thing I would add too is that, so we've a couple of things, is that I think we've had at least two or three lenders reach out and call us daily, looking for new business to lend. So this is a little bit different than 08 and 09 when just lending froze. This lending has definitely changed, and it's changing daily. But from all of our conversations, everybody is still kind of open for business to lend. We've got 5 closings going on right now. One's a sale, one's a refi, and then there's 3 acquisitions. All the deals that we've got going on right now, all the lenders have said that they were going to honor their term sheet as they quoted it, and we're marching to close. Now on new stuff, obviously Fannie and Freddie put out their new requirements of depending on where the property is located, how much principal and interest are going to have you put in reserves. In bigger markets, it looks like it's going to be 6 months worth of reserves. In more tertiary markets, it's going to be 12 months. And then you get that back after you have a 1.25 debt service coverage ratio for a couple months in a row. So anyways, but those are changing daily, but that just came out two days ago or so, on that guidance there. So it's good that lenders are lending. So you can work out some of your properties that are probably somewhat distressed. You may not like the loan that you're going to get, but it'll let you survive to when we bounce out of this in a couple months, 6 to 9 months or so.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Scott, let's pop over to the next slide now. So as far as next steps are concerned, get that letter out, open up those lines of communication with your tenants, right? If they have that hardship, address it with them. As Gary's pointed out, there are many different programs you can take advantage of that you can also offer to your tenants as well, right? In terms of assistance programs, food banks, unemployment, connecting that tenant with those resources is going to help you, and it's obviously going to help them as well. So, but the remaining proactive is going to be important, not only, of course, to your tenants, as I just mentioned, but also with your lenders, right? Connect with them as quickly as possible. And when I mean lenders, it's not just your assets, but also your liabilities, your credit card. You know what? Hey, listen, if you're carrying a large debt, you're doing a rehab right now, and you have like a $20,000 credit card bill, give them a call. Maybe they'll waive the interest for a couple of months. It's $400 a month. Hey, it's $400 a month. Why not, right? But no matter what, take care of the property. Don't let it fall into disrepair. It becomes a slippery slope if you don't maintain it. So try to find a way to get something maintained and stay on top of it. Go ahead and hit the next slide. So we're requiring that people show proof that they got laid off. Here's an example of an application for forbearance. Again, this is not legal advice. This is just something that's out there. If you guys are watching right now, I know some of you guys are on the phone, but you can screenshot this. This presentation will be available later on as well. We'll email it to everyone so you guys can take a look at this page. But this might be a good template for you to use. But I would really recommend for those who really want help with this specific thing, reach out to David. David will certainly help you put one of these documents together or something like it, and really, again, open up those lines of communication in a legal manner. All right, everything that you're going to communicate with them is going to have some sort of legal binding to it. Let's go ahead and hit the next slide. So, and just as David pointed out too, banks are being ordered to work with people. So this pandemic has really shifted the way people are thinking, and lenders are actually going out of their way to really help. And like I mentioned, credit cards, auto loans, small business loans, anything with a loan on it, you can certainly take advantage of in terms of improving your personal cash flow, your global cash flow, by requesting a reduction in your interest rate. So call your lenders. Call your lenders, everyone. That's a big message right now for everyone that's going through this, right? Especially us as landlords. So go ahead and hit the next slide. So here's some information too that you can also use while we're going through this issue. So for those you guys out there that are still buying stuff, Scott, you have a great tool, Rehab Estimator. Maybe you can talk a little bit about it really quick, and then I do want to leave time for a Q&A because I can see that the chat box down here is like blinking like crazy. So I want to make sure that we can get some of the Q&A here. We're already a little over, but let's go ahead and knock it out, man.
Yeah, we started this process with being able to go into houses, and you take half an hour looking through a house to determine how much the repairs are going to cost you. Well, I put together a tool, rehabestimatorpro.com, that allows you to be able to estimate the process very, very quickly. Well, originally when I put it together, it was actually physically going through the houses, but now it's easily converted to, hey, what's the condition of the kitchen? Oh, hey, yes, we need a kitchen. And when you're all done, then you have an estimate on what the repairs are. And so you can make your offer before you even get off the phone call. So you can do it all remotely.
Excellent. Great stuff. And if you sign up now, I guess you get 2 months free for Rehab Estimator Pro. So something actually, I think that's going to be a permanent way to do business on a go-forward basis, right? If you talk to someone over the phone that might want to sell their place, you can literally enter all the information right into this app, and it'll tell you what the right value should be for that property. So definitely take a look at that if that's your line of business. Go ahead and hit the next slide there, Scott. Now, all this Corona stuff is going to be short-lived, and when I say short-lived, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, something along that range. It's not going to be forever. The thing is that you still have to keep your skills sharp. If you are looking to sharpen your skills and how to talk to brokers, which you should be doing, or even raising capital, if you type the word freedom to 202-410-4202, we've got a couple of free ebooks for you. Go ahead and do that. Also, subscribe to the Bulletproof Cash Flow YouTube channel as well. We're always putting out great material there too. Check out the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. And of course, if you want to reach out to me, go ahead and message info@bulletproofcashflow.com, and we'll be sure to reach out to you. Screenshot, by the way, don't forget to take the screenshots if you're seeing this right now, or if you want to reach out post this presentation, we'll make the presentation available as I mentioned earlier. So go ahead and hit the next slide. So David, maybe tell us if you want to reach out to David, here's his contact information. But he can certainly help you.
There's a lot of familiar names on the participant list here. So I've talked to many of you already, but you know what? Reach out, shoot me an email. My direct line is on there as well. That's the best way. Don't call the office because I'm working from home these days. But I'm always willing to spend a few minutes on the phone just to answer questions. So feel free to reach out.
Yeah. And then go ahead and hit the next slide. And my good friend Kenny, who you heard just speak right now, he's a very successful investor. He's been doing this for a very, very, very long time. He's got assets all in 4 different states at this point. He's got a lot of units.
Yeah, guys, definitely reach out, connect with us. You can see our website there, wolf-investments.com. If you want to learn more and kind of follow what we're doing, there's a big red subscribe button. You can sign up for put your name and email in there. And also you'll have an opt-in to set up a phone call or a meeting here in our Texas office. So probably mostly phone calls with this group. But anyway, so check us out. We're on Facebook. We got a YouTube channel as well, LinkedIn. We would love to hear from you guys.
Excellent, excellent. So we're a little over right now, but I want to spend some time and answer questions. I think it's important that we try to address as many questions as we can. Now, Scott, do you want to maybe go through some of these questions here and maybe take it from the top and see what we can answer for these good people here?
Okay, well, a number of the questions have already been answered. That's the one nice thing about having everybody on, that some of the other people answer the questions for us. One of the questions was, will the slides be available? Yeah, we're going to put together an email, and the slides will be at the other end. There'll be a link in there to download the email, to download them. One of the questions that did get answered, I think, David, you answered this one. Can we use part of the security deposit as rent? I want to emphasize that one. I'll say just a quick second on that. David?
Wait, what was that again? I'm sorry.
Can you use part of the security deposit as rent?
You know, I would say no. Security deposits are what they are. At the end of the day, when a tenancy terminates, that security deposit at that point could be used for rent or damages, past due rent that's due. But the statute's pretty clear, and most lease agreements prohibit, that I've seen, that, to use, the security deposit, for rent per se. If you do that, you're just basically robbing Peter to pay Paul. You're not really increasing, cash flow a whole lot. And now you have a tenant that has no security deposit left. So I guess my point is, I don't think it matters, but, don't earmark that per se.
Now, and there's something else with that too, David. And I think that this is often a big mistake, is that we often make the security deposit the same amount of money as the rent. And people seem to think in their head, well, since it's the same amount, that must be for rent. Well, what I look to do, and I mean, Gary's got to do this, I think, but well, what I'd like to do anyway is eventually make our security deposit a different amount than the actual rent itself. So if the rent is $800, maybe security deposit's $900 or $850 or $750 or whatever. So you're clearly delineating this is a different bucket. It's not the same bucket. So the reason why that question even comes up is because people associate it, well, it's the same amount, it must be in the same bucket, but it's not. It's two different things, right?
Well,
so
I see it from a schematic standpoint, but your lease agreement's going to make it clear. And, not to get into all the details, but if you start collecting more than 1 month's rent security deposit, it puts you as a landlord in an obligation. It'll accrue rent. Yeah, sure, it's nominal,
right.
But it's a separate accounting piece that you need to do and account for.
Well, and according to state law, you have to pay interest on any money over the rent.
1 month's rent, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
1 month rent.
Yeah. So yeah, good point. Yes, good point. What other questions do we have, Scott?
Quick question for Gary. Is Rently able to accept payments, specifically online payments?
Not for rent. I did see that question pop up. Rently is primarily just a vehicle to be able to do a virtual showing without sending an agent to the property. I did see that come up, and then they do take payments, but it's a payment for the showing. So when you get there, the box itself has a slot for a debit card to go into the bottom, or a credit card to go into the bottom of it, and the resident is charged a nominal fee for that showing. At which time they also collect the person's financial information, so that if they for some reason don't return the key and we have to change the locks, or they do something to their property, we have some recourse against them on coming back, to kind of reduces some of the risk. Rently guarantees everything, so that if something does happen, they take care of it. We've not ever had that happen. So I saw another question come up. I'll just skip down to it. So because it's also related to taking rents online. Our online rent happens through our management software. It doesn't happen through Rently. So you have to have some vehicle of software that allows you to do that remotely, either online or like with Appfolio. It allows you to take cash payments at Ace Cash Express, CVS, or 7-Eleven. You give them a payment coupon and they go in and they can just hand the 7-Eleven their renting cash and it automatically gets applied to their rent.
Now they can also use like cozy.co or something like that, which I think is a free property management
It could
online
be.
type.
Yeah, there's some of those out there, Augustino. I'm not familiar with a lot of those. There used to be one out there that did it, but they would charge a nominal fee, but they didn't really stay in existence that long just because the fees were not, I don't think, high enough to justify what they were doing.
Right. Yeah. But I know of Cozy, COZY.co, which might be good for independent or self-managers,
Right.
that kind of thing. But yes, Peggy, you asked about what sort of payment processors are best. Venmo's fine. If you're going to use PayPal, I find that if you do it as a business, they charge you like 3.5%. It can be very, very expensive. If you send money as a friend, it's free. So just keep that in mind. Zelle, actually, I still have one small single family property left in Virginia. I sold everything except for that one, right? So the last one I got, and that's how we take payments. We take it with Zelle, right? So that's how we do it. And Zelle's great. It's no cost, works super. Love it. Scott, any other questions that we have?
The only other question was, Gary, you mentioned some resources that you had gathered. Is there any way that you would consider sharing that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So reach out to me by email and I'd be happy to forward that information. I know you didn't put mine at the end, but it's just go to remcommercial.com, find my profile on the staff pull down, and you can reach me that way. And then I can forward on the list that we compiled for the counties that we manage in.
Actually,
There it is. Okay, gotcha.
And what we'll do is when we send the presentation back out, we'll also send out everybody's contact information. So don't you have to scramble to write all this down. We'll send it out to you guys.
Yes, and feel free to ask other questions of me through email. I'd be happy to answer them for you.
Absolutely. All right. Any other questions from the audience? All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Panel, thank you so much for really coming on. I appreciate it. If you have any questions, again, reach out to the group. Always here to help you guys. Build success, guys. Be bulletproof. All right. Talk to you guys soon.
Thank y'all.
Thank you. All right.